Welcome back to Breakfast. It's coming up 20 minutes past 6. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern joins NATO leaders at their summit in Madrid later today, making her the first New Zealand Prime Minister to attend such a meeting. Top of their agenda, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, of course. Once the NATO summit is over, the PM will turn her attention to the EU free trade negotiations with Brussels. For more, we're joined by Otago University International Relations expert Professor Robert Patman. Robert, thank you so much for joining us, especially at this time of the morning. We so appreciate your expertise, so bright and early.
Good morning, Matty. I don't know about bright, but I'm certainly early.
Yeah, we'll get through it together, all right? This is really significant. We were just talking about it in the ad break. And mentioned it in the introduction. This is the first time a New Zealand Prime Minister has ever been invited to one of these NATO summits, let alone invited to speak. Talk to us about the significance of this.
Well, it is significant, but I think it reflects the gravity of the geopolitical situation in Europe and the world. Because the situation, the flagrant invasion by Russia of Ukraine has significance for Europe, but it has significance worldwide. This is just an absolute direct assault on the UN Charter. And there's worries it may create a precedent. And of course, there's worries in the Indo-Pacific about Chinese assertiveness. Now, so I think, Jacinda Ardern has been invited because New Zealand's international standing has gone up in the last few years over the way we handled the Christchurch terror atrocity and also our response to COVID-19. And also the fact that after a tentative start, New Zealand has got quite involved in supporting Ukraine against the aggression of Russia.
Do we know what she'll be asked about specifically, though? Because I imagine it's possibly more about the situation in the Pacific than perhaps her thoughts on Ukraine.
Yeah, but I think the two are linked because I think one thing, there's a debate going on within NATO. Some countries have suggested maybe Ukraine should move towards a land for peace solution, giving Russia some land. I think New Zealand's position is different. We take the view that the rules must be upheld. We're a small country, but we're a global player. That is to say, we trade with more than 100 countries. We critically depend on what's called the international rules-based order. And so I think when I say that Russia and China are linked, what I mean by that is the solution or the approach to dealing with the invasion will have ramifications for China. And from New Zealand's point of view, perhaps the best China strategy, if you want to put it that way, is to ensure the firm ejection of Mr. Putin's troops from Ukraine, because that will send a message to China that, and China has actually recently gone out on a limb. It said that Mr. Putin's invasion of Ukraine was legitimate. And that, from New Zealand's point of view, is unacceptable. So I think New Zealand's role may be there to stiffen resolve and not to look at a deal giving Ukraine, putting pressure on Ukraine to give Russia some sort of reward for its invasion. I think that would be very destabilizing, and I think New Zealand has a big stake in resisting that option.
I mean, we mentioned the significance. We're not a NATO member, so to have a Prime Minister of ours be invited to speak there, invited to speak there is big. Does it kind of mark a shift, do you think, in terms of New Zealand's position with foreign policy on the global stage?
No, I don't think. Some people believe that we're being forced to make a choice and we're moving towards the Americans and the NATO position. I think actually it's a recognition that most security problems now can only be resolved on a multilateral basis, which suits New Zealand. We want to have a voice at the table, and therefore we want to have a say as a small country in shaping the security architecture of the world. So in a sense, I think there's a recognition that there's no unilateral solutions now to security problems. And we've been involved, and it's good to be included in the part of the effort to deal with this. So I actually see, if you like, the world's moving a bit towards the New Zealand position that international problems need international solutions, and we're part. Hopefully we're part of the solution as well.
I mean, it's a big trip she's making and a lot on the agenda, but I noted that she turned down, of course, Ukrainian President Zelensky's offer to visit Ukraine in person. Was it a wise decision, do you think?
I think it's a scheduling decision, and politicians and leaders They do not like to reschedule once a schedule's set out because it can cause diplomatic embarrassment. Someone would have to be put off to accommodate, presumably, President Zelensky. And I think how the interesting thing is that the Deputy Prime Minister did make a point of emphasising that Jacinda Ardern will, at the first opportunity, meet with President Zelensky when both their schedules align. So I don't think it's a snub or anything like that. I think it's just that, these sort of visits are planned well in advance. And it's probably a question of what, pretty intense scheduling. And I think President Zelensky, because he's in a war situation, isn't able to plan ahead in the same way that leaders are not in a war situation. So that may account for that inability to align the two on this occasion.
High on the agenda as well, of course, is this free trade deal with the EU, and these negotiations have been dragging on for years now. And there's this deadline that they've self-imposed deadline for talks, which ends in a few days. So how significant is this to try and get this deal over the line?
I think it's very significant. We shouldn't forget, despite the frustrations of the negotiations, the rewards are considerable. The EU has the biggest and most prosperous single market in the world. We would like enhanced access to that. We already have what Minister Damien O'Connor calls a gold standard free trade agreement with Britain. We would like to have a free trade agreement with the EU because it adds momentum to this process of economic diversification. I think the government's very conscious that our trade at the moment is relying quite heavily on China. We want to diversify, and that involves not only looking beyond the Indo-Pacific, but to Europe and North America.
Robert, you're so brilliant. And as I said, we really appreciate you getting up this early for us.
Thank you.
As we do every time. That's Robert Patman from Otago University.
Thanks very much, Matty.
Have a great day.